You're fighting to save an ideal that doesn't exist. Never did. You need to pick a side.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is an open discussion with C3 Films. My name is Chris, and this is
Cheryl.
And today we're going to be talking about the movie Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. So this is the first part of, I think, a two-part series in these movies, where it's going to be leading to the end of the Mission Impossible franchise as a whole. So, spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about things that happened in the movie. If you haven't seen it, go watch it and then come back and see what we had to say about it. But let's go ahead and jump right in. So, Cheryl, so this is the second movie that we're talking about today that is a part of a long-running franchise that is now coming to an end through the use of a multi-part finale. Have you followed the Mission Impossible series for the entire time up until now?
I have not, but I did watch them all. I just watched them all. I just watched them all so I could watch this one.
Oh, wait, really? So you watched them all recently?
Like last year.
Yo, okay.
In preparation for, because we knew they were making this, so that's when I watched them all. Actually, I didn't even really want to, but I watched the first one and I was like, oh, pretty good. And then I watched the other ones and I'm like, these are really fun.
Thank you. Okay, I'm really glad to hear you say that. So I have also been a fan of Mission Impossible since I was a kid. I remember watching the first movie. I think I saw the first movie on VHS. I think I watched it with my mom and somebody else. I don't remember. But I remember being told things like how John Voight was the original Ethan Hunt, or I guess that character. I don't know if they're the same name, but it was the original character that Tom Cruise now plays. John Voight was that original character in the original Mission Impossible television show, if I'm not mistaken. You guys in the chat, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. And so, anyways, so I remember watching that first movie, and I loved that first movie. That movie exposed me to Tom Cruise in the first place. I had never seen him before then. It exposed me to John Reno, who's also in that movie. John Voight, who's, like I just mentioned, and I hadn't seen him before that, and found out that later on that's Angelina Jolie's father. So, like, there were just so many things from the first Mission Impossible film that stuck with me as a kid that I've never forgotten. And it carried me through all those franchise movies to this day. And what I like about those films is that at least in the beginning, all of those films had different directors, and each of those directors brought something different and a different feel to the Mission Impossible franchise. John Woo was the person who did the second one. J.J. Abrams actually did the third film. And so you have a bunch of different directors that came to this franchise and elevated it and slowly evolved it over time. And so, truthfully, those movies I have loved to be a part of and to see grow and change over time. And yes, they are not all the same level, but I think that they all bring something interesting, and they bring something unique as far as some type of spectacle that you're going to see in those movies. And so that's one of the things that I think is really defining about this franchise. So, but yeah, like, what did you think about seeing all those movies up into this one, and what did you think about Dead Reckoning?
I mean, I liked all the ones before. I thought they were all entertaining. Definitely another kind of movie or series of movies that you have to suspend your belief for. But but they're a lot of fun, and like, I mean, also we'll have that very iconic score, the Mission Impossible theme that I didn't even know that's what it was from. But I knew the music before I watched the movie. So that's, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I think Mission Impossible is probably like a cult film. It's one of the ones that goes down in history for like a lot of things. I think it changed a lot of stuff in, like, you know, the history of film. So it's definitely somehow an important movie for film history. But also, like, it's just fun, and like who doesn't love a spy movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think for this one though, I was struggling with understanding what was going on because it has to do with technology and AI being like a sentient being, and that's the enemy.
Yeah.
And I kind of like the way they, even though it's like this, big kind of complicated, complex story, probably a little bit too complex in my opinion. At least they broke it up so that this first movie could have an ending, whereas the other movie that we were talking about, Fast 10, kind of just ended on a cliffhanger, and like they're about to like die or something, and then it just stops. But here, like, they accomplished one thing, which is to try to get the keys to whatever it gets to, because they don't even know what it unlocks. But that's like step one, and then step two is to defeat the enemy, which is like to find the place where the key unlocks, and assuming that's the sentient being or the sentient AI, and then destroy it. So I do feel like the next movie is going to be like bigger. It's going to be more intense, because I think they had kind of hinted in the movie that all the world powers are going to be kind of after this tool, which is dumb, because I think like everyone's kind of figuring out that the AI is sentient, and you're not going to be able to control it because, well, you already can't control it, and how are you going to control something like that? It's just like a dangerous thing. But I don't know, it makes you think about like what kind of technology you have in your house, your phone, your social media, and they're like already listening to you and stuff like that. So and then on top of that, making it sentient, like making your phone sentient, it's like scary.
Yeah, so this thing that this Fast and Furious movie, I'll say Fast and Furious, oh my gosh, this thing that this Mission Impossible film has is that there's still a lot of cool Mission Impossible things in this film. Like there's the whole espionage. You have the mask that have been really famous to Mission Impossible. Like, you want to talk about suspending your disbelief? It's like having these masks that look exactly like another human being. But it's always cool. I always love seeing them prep for some of their jobs, so you get to see them, how they make the mask and stuff like that, which you got to see in other films too, but it's always fun to watch. And this film does the Mission Impossible thing that we see in every film, where they start with that opening score, and they show that little that match being lit, and that thing like going on fire, and then they cut through all the scenes that are going to happen in the movie. So the opening of the film is essentially a giant spoiler, because it literally shows you everything that you're about to watch. But that's what they did in the television show, and so they're trying to still be, I guess, true to their roots. And I love that the fact that the movies have never forgotten that. That being said, this is probably one of my most frustrating of Mission Impossible films. There's a lot of movies at this point, and this film, and I've seen them all, like, and you have too, and this one isn't one of my favorites, actually. And that's not to take away from it for people that did enjoy the film, but for me personally, there's just not a lot that I love about it. So I like some of the sequences, like at the airport. I like how they have the whole bomb thing that they're having to defuse at the same time while they're being hunted by these agents and stuff like that. But I think so. There's a couple of problems, but I think that my two biggest problems are based around these things. One, I don't think Grace, Haley Atwell's character, is a good character. She is actually kind of a jerk and constantly leaves Ethan in these situations where he would have died. And to me, it doesn't make sense story-wise why he would be trying so hard to like protect or save her. Whereas when you have someone like Elsa, who's been in the franchise before and is a lot more capable and a lot more interesting, and then they just kind of get rid of her in this movie, I hated that. But I get it. They wanted to create stakes for for their team, so they're like, hey, we have to like kill somebody. But I still just did not. Ilsa's death didn't feel right to me in this film. And my other issue is that the big stunt in this film, the stunt that is, because every Mission Impossible movie has a stunt that is billed as this is the reason to see this film because of this stunt. And when you see like a Mission Impossible movie and he's outside on the edge on outside of the building in Dubai and he's climbing it, or he's falling off of a helicopter and onto like these ropes, and as it's going as he's chasing the villain or whatever, like there's always these stunts that are interesting and that when you see in the trailer it's only one piece of it and there's always something more to it and the sequence is longer. But in this film the big stunt is him jumping off of that cliff, like free diving off of the cliff with the motorcycle, and they show it in the trailer and that's it. Like what you see in the trailer, that's the stunt. There's nothing more to it. There's nothing else that happens. He jumps off the cliff, he releases his parachute, that's it. And that was kind of a letdown because I get it, you want to sell your movie so you want to show the stunt, and like I said, these other films they did that same thing. But then when you go and see the movie you find out that there's actually so much more to that stunt where it's extended. There's other things that you didn't get to see. But in this film, the thing that you saw in the trailer is the thing you see in the movie, and for me that just, when I was like that's it, so that kind of felt like a letdown.
Yeah, I agree. When that whole like leading up to that part, that whole sequence, I was like, oh, that's how they're setting this up. Like he's being led up there because he missed the train, and I was but then like when he missed the train I'm like, how did he miss the train? Like it didn't really look like he missed the train, and how is going up a mountain supposed to be faster? And then they spent so much time talking about whether or not he should do it. I'm like, well, I feel like you're gonna miss the train again. It just, I think I agree. It did feel kind of like a letdown for me, and I knew that it was coming. I actually forgot about it. And then when he was driving up the mountain, I was like, oh, this is going to be that thing that we saw that everyone was talking about. And I was like, oh, that kind of sucks because I feel like it's been spoiled. It's like, like ruined now. And I feel like at this time, like there's been so many Mission Impossible movies, you don't need to like reveal all your secrets to, sell the movie. It's a franchise that's already going to sell itself. So
True.
Giving away this big stunt, like it just kind of like, oh, I already know what he's gonna do, so I'm not like wondering about it. And I also know like that he actually did it and stuff like that. I have no questions, so I don't know, like I agree. I feel like it's not as tight knit as the previous movies, and I think part of it is because when they try to do this thing where they make movies into multiple movies, like it's one story that takes place over the course of more than one movie, it tends to be like just too complex. It's just too much, and it doesn't need to be. And this is an action movie, right? Like both of our picks for our stream today were multi-part stories,
right?
And they're both overly complicated. Actually, I would say the Fast 10 isn't that complicated.
No,
it's
I would
just
say.
Yeah, but this one I think is definitely overly complicated. However, I did feel like it was more entertaining. I was more invested in the characters, and I don't know if that has anything to do with the fact that I've seen all the previous Mission Impossible movies, but I feel like I had more fun with the Mission Impossible. But I think I also agree with you about like the character of Grace not being. I'm not like a huge fan of her character. It just kind of felt like, oh, we have another pretty actress for Tom Cruise to hang out with, but then we also had Ilsa, so I was like, why do we need Grace?
Ilsa's more interesting. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and like it was all lined up too because she was at the beginning, and I thought they were gonna like it's like the band's back together, right? But then she doesn't really get to be a part of it because we're working with Grace now, and
also they faked her death at the beginning. They make you think Ilsa dies at the beginning of the film, and then you find out she's not dead, and then they kill her anyway, like halfway through the movie. And it's like, wait, what? Why are you doing that? Like, I hate it when stories do that, where they fake a character's death only to kill that character again later, whether it's a couple of episodes later or like a couple of minutes later. And so it just, I don't know. Like I said, that was one of my main issues. Like, that just didn't sit right with me. And Playmat already put like a really good comment in the chat that kind of also explains the overall sentiment. I do like that some of the set pieces that were in the film. So the ending set piece of the train falling off the tracks, I thought was really cool. So like, obviously us gamers, we've seen this before in the Uncharted series. Yes. Anyone who's played Uncharted 2 knows exactly what this is. But as far as like having it be in a movie, I was like, okay, this is cool. I don't think I've really seen this too much in a movie. I can't actually think of a movie maybe Wanted actually. Huh?
It's in Uncharted.
It was in the live action Uncharted movie?
I don't even
I barely remember that movie. I wouldn't be surprised. It was also in like the Wanted film, but I still think that Park. At least. Yeah. Oh God. Oh my God. You're right. All right. Anyways, point is, I didn't mind how they did it in this film. I still thought it was cool to see. I still thought it did like ratchet up some tension with them having to get out before. And they kept going through different train cars as each train, like, it wasn't just one train car that was falling. It was multiple, and they kept falling. So I was like, okay, like visually, I think that is cool to see. And one of the things that I'll always give Mission Impossible credit for is how it does its how it tells you things. Like, it gives its background information. Like, the word's escaping me now, but how it tells you what's going on. And like how it does it, like delivers its monologues or whatever, like people sitting in a room talking. And because essentially there's a scene in the beginning of the film after you find out that Ilsa is the one that stole the thing that the government is after, where you have like this group of people in a room sitting around basically talking about the plot of the movie. And the thing is that it isn't boring. And the reason it isn't boring is because of a cool trick that Mission Impossible movies do, but it's specifically what this one does, where before we get to that scene with all these people in the room talking, it starts with a guy who we don't recognize walking in with a briefcase. And right away we think, who is this guy? And then we see that guy enters the room. So now we have a little bit of intrigue / a little bit of tension of who is this guy? Why is he here? What is he going to do? And yes, we're just given information where people are just essentially talking about the plot, but we have this level of tension that's over the entire scene because there's this guy in this room that's not supposed to be here. And then it blows up and we find out that the guy is Ethan. And then we have another scene where it's essentially just two people talking about the plot. Ethan and the other guy, I forget his name, but he was from one of the other movies, but they're just talking about the plot. But now the reason that this is interesting, because we're thinking to ourselves, well, how is Ethan going to get out of this? Because there's no way to, like, he can escape, right? He's trapped in here, this government building, and people are going to come after him. And then that adds to the intrigue once he actually does escape, and we see how he pulls it off. So the way that this movie handles just exposition, oh my God, my brain. But the way that the movie handles delivering exposition is done in a very interesting and exciting way, so that it's not just, it doesn't feel like people just sitting in a room talking, but that's essentially what it is. But it added these extra elements that add tension so that this thing that we're watching that would normally be boring doesn't feel boring.
Yeah, and I think the other thing they did, because actually that scene, it's funny you bring it up, because you wouldn't really think that that's a scene that you would bring up to talk about. But I found it interesting because the way they were delivering the information happens through many voices. There's a bunch of people in that room, but they're all explaining it together. And it's like the most unnatural way that a conversation would happen in a room full of people, because they are just, it's kind of like the Borg or something, where like they're all thinking the same thing and they're all saying everything, but it's like one at a time. Each person has a sentence to add to the same description of something. And then when you get down to the part where Ethan's talking to, I think his name is
Kittredge. Thank you. Yeah.
And like they have this, and I didn't notice it the first time, but I noticed it when I was, watching it again to review. That they move the camera quite a few times, and they break the line in their cuts, and like normally, like, I mean, we learn like, oh, you don't do that, there's a line for a reason, and it's because like it's the way that you feel natural watching something, the way you edit something, and the way that the camera is placed. But when you move it across the line, then it looks weird, and it does.
It's jarring.
It makes you feel uncomfortable, and I've seen it used like in the Hulk, the one with that Liv Tyler was in, and I know like a lot of people didn't like that movie, but I actually liked it because they broke the line when with the scene with her dad and everything. So I thought it was interesting. It's another case where like it's intentionally used, where this rule is broken to make you feel uncomfortable, and so I actually really thought that scene was like super interesting for it being like really boring content.
Yeah. No, exactly. And so that's one of the things I will give the movie props where props are due, and I think that is something that the movie does very well. I think that the movie just kind of falters in other places. Like, I forget this character's name. What was Paris, the henchman of Gabriel in the film, and like I feel like they didn't really do much with her. She's kind of just a villain that doesn't speak and is intended to be kind of crazy, but doesn't really do much or bring much to the table. I mean, even Gabriel, I don't actually think is very interesting as a villain. And even Gabriel is essentially a henchman for a villain that we're not seeing, that being the AI, this kind of like overarching or overlooking villain that exists in the clouds somewhere. And so, like, I think that this movie kind of falls on his face when it comes to actually having engaging or interesting villains that I want to see defeated or overthrown. And yeah, so I think that so the lack of good villains and then the overcomplicated plot, I think, kind of just bring this movie down a little bit for me. And I don't mean to say that it's like a bad film by any stretch of the imagination, but I do mean to say, because like I said, we just talked about how they do some really cool and interesting things, but I do feel like for me, as far as Mission Impossible movies go, I kind of have this, like, if not at the bottom, near the bottom of my list.
Yeah, and I think like I'd agree with that. I was really disappointed with what they did with the character of Paris. I was hoping that she would have something more to do later, but then they kill her off, and it's like this whole thing. I think like, and it just kind of brings me back to the whole thing of this plot being like overly complicated, because then you kind of go into this like mind trick thing like constantly of like the AI predicting everyone's actions and stuff like that, and so it already knows what you're gonna do and stuff like that. And Gabriel's like, you're gonna betray me, so I'm gonna kill you now, and she gets hurt, and then later she says that he was right, I was gonna betray him because I heard everything, but I'm like, no, you betrayed him because he beat you up and he tried to kill you. And had he not done that, you may have still,
been on his
side. And like, there was no like layers of complexity to that character. It's kind of like she was there to be a threat, and then she died saving them, and so like.
Yeah.
I didn't like, almost like she was just a tool to move the story along and then end it, and that kind of, again, with the overly complicated thing, I guess I would agree with the whole thing with Gabriel not even being the main villain. He's kind of like Saruman to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where he's just a puppet and he's like the villain in the first movie, but then later on he has nothing to do with anything because
Yeah.
he's just there to like intimidate you at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But he's really nothing. So, I mean, I don't know. I just think it's too complicated. But I did like the different elements of it. I like that they brought, the same characters back. I like the action sequences. I like a lot of stuff in the different elements they had that carry forward from the previous movies.
Mm-hmm.
I just wish they didn't make it so complicated.
Yeah, and we'll see how the movies progress from here. There's a chance that they get even more complicated or the next movie, which I think might be the final film. I think this one is only supposed to be 2 movies. It's a 2-parter, but for the end. So we'll see if it gets even more complicated or how they keep things interesting. I'll still be on board to see it, but yeah, I think I have to say, yeah, this movie kind of disappointed me a little bit, but is there anything else that you kind of had to say that you wanted to get out about the movie?
I wanted to ask if you thought that maybe Jeremy Renner might return for the part 2.
Oh, you know what? And I remember thinking to myself that I was upset that his character did not come back. And I remember I did some research, and now I don't even remember, but there was something, either timing or he wasn't asked or something, but there was something weird where he wasn't able to come back for this movie, even though it seemed like he wanted to. And part of me even wonders if they killed his character off screen or something like that, but I don't really remember.
I wonder if it's because of his accident, his snow accident.
No, because I think they would have been done filming the movie by the time that snow accident came around. But at least for the first film. So, yeah, I would love to see that character return. I like that character a lot in the films. I like what he had to offer. And yeah, I like seeing returning characters in their teams because you'll notice in the first couple of movies that their team kind of rotates out a lot, with the only consistent being Ving Rhames' character. And then eventually, I think it's after Mission Impossible 4 that Simon Pegg becomes like a regular cast member of the team. And so it's those 3. So, and then of course, then eventually Ilsa as well. So I like the fact that they started to have like an actual team as opposed to just rotating members like what we're used to seeing for the first couple of movies. So yeah, I would love to see Jeremy Renner's character come back. I think that he'd be a great addition, and I think if you're going to end out the franchise, if that character is still alive in the continuity, then he should be there. You should have everybody that is kind of do like the Fast and Furious thing, right? Like you should have everybody that's been a part of this franchise that's still alive at least show up in some way, shape, or form. They don't have to have a big role, but it'd be nice to see them because this is us capping off this franchise and saying goodbye to it.
How do you feel about Ethan's wife? Because I know they kind of gave her some closure in a previous movie, and then she doesn't really come back. But how would you feel if she didn't come back, or if she did?
I'd want to see her at least one more time. I was surprised they brought her back after 3, because I remember seeing her in the 3rd one, and then I thought we weren't going to see her ever again. And I think they brought her back in Fallout, if I'm not mistaken. And I was happy to see her. I was like, I want you guys to pay attention to the continuity that you created. So yes, Ethan has a wife out there. Thank you for making sure that we know and we remember that. Ghost Protocol. Thank you. Appreciate it. So yeah, I was like, I'm glad to see that this character is still here. So yeah, I would love if she came back because she's still out there. So I want to see all these characters come back in some way if they're still alive, and including her. So yeah, it was great the fact that they remembered her after Mission Impossible 3. So I was so happy to see that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was cool that they, even had her in the other movies, and then in the one, I think it was the movie before Dead Reckoning, that they they really, really brought her back, and they gave her more screen time, and she's sort of part of the story, and I think they kind of gave closure, like they closed that chapter. And but I still would like to see her come back in some way. I don't know how I would feel about them, getting back together. So I kind of have mixed feelings because I think they closed the books on her. So I'm not sure if it's right to bring her back.
I hear what you're saying. So I guess it comes down to how it's treated. If they're gonna do something interesting with her, then of course. But if they're going to kind of ruin the nice little send off that they gave for that character, then why do it at all?
Exactly.
So, but yeah, was there anything else?
That's it for me.
So that's what we thought about Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1 of 2, we believe. So what did you guys think about the movie? Did you enjoy it? Is it one of your favorite Mission Impossible films? Where does it rank on your list of Mission Impossible films? Are you going to see the second one when it comes out in theaters? Are you looking forward to see what stunt they're going to come up with next? Whatever you thought about that and more, comment below. Let us know. And while you're down there, if you give us a like, share, subscribe. Even if you don't, though, I have been Chris, and this has been
Cheryl, and I accept this mission.